Welcome back to the Worldtellers podcast. We have started this morning in record time. No precast conversation or anything.
All because Alicia has to go to the DMV.
Yeah, thanks a lot.
Brett got us all in line.
No rough and tumble play.
No,
Nothing. None of our pre-podcasts.
So she's going to get to the DMV an hour and a half early?
7:40. She got an appointment at 7:45.
What?
She got to be there at 7:30 though. So she'll probably leave around 1:30.
How do you go about getting
She'll
an
be there for
appointment?
5 hours.
Do you have to call in for like a month ahead?
She was just going to go after lunch, and then she found an appointment last night because there was no appointments. She couldn't find any appointments.
Oh, I was going to say, I think they're like 6 months out, unless maybe you do that. Okay.
Yeah,
You gotta have the last name Honeycutt.
How inefficient is it?
it's pretty inefficient.
Well,
It's like luckily we all have to deal with it
But
so
they-
little that
Just for anybody listening, apparently every other time you have to renew it in person.
oh, really?
Yeah.
Because I just renewed mine.
But they do have a couple self-service kiosks at like a grocery store, a Harris Teeter.
Oh, my goodness.
I'm just here to
Wow.
just
Yeah.
spread the good news.
Yeah.
The good news.
not going to the DMV.
Nothing like a little DMV talk at 6 in the morning.
Yeah. That's what's up.
Is there anything people enjoy less than go anyway?
Is it the mentality of you already are going in knowing what the DMV is, or is it the DMV literally is what what you envision the DMV to be pretty much every time you go to the DMV? Does that make sense?
I think it's
No, that question did not make sense to me.
I think it's just
like,
the
do we
overall-
already come in with this, like, this is going to be horrible, and then it's horrible? Or is it, no, this is horrible,
Well,
and I
have
don't
you
care
ever
how...
have you ever had a pleasant experience?
Well,
No, but that's what
I will say, as of late, well, as long as you're not in the like the driver's side, then you're fine. Every time I go to the one in Huntersville, it's like a brand new facility. It's wonderful. There's 2 lines there. The one I'm going in has like 1 person in there, and there's like 70 people to the. Oh my gosh, I was in there. There's a lot of young people, but people of all ages. And there was a lady in there who was like a drill instructor, and there's all these chairs there. She was like, "All right, everybody up," and they were listening to her. They all got up like they were some kind of like military like platoon.
Does she work there or she just...
Yeah, no, she works there.
I was going to say I don't think you were at the DMV.
She's got like short hair. She's probably like 50s or 60s, but just had authority, and they were all listening to her. Like not one person was rolling their
What was
eyes.
she
They,
making them do?
all
Like
stood up.
burpees and
No,
jumping
so
jacks?
she would count out like 7 or 8 people, have everyone stand up, and then like move chairs. And this was like early in the morning. She already had them all like trained, man. And then dude, it was amazing, actually. I'm sitting there watching it from the other side.
But
I'm
what
like,
was she accomplishing? Getting people to move through the chairs?
Yeah, in a methodical manner.
There's probably
Setting
no
the
other way
tone.
to do it, because there's people
Setting
that
the
everybody's
tone.
so distracted and stuff that they're probably just like, it's like, unless you have some...
Hold on. So if you're a new driver, it's a really long line. But if you're going to renew, it's
If you're gonna
not a
get, like,
bad place.
tag stuff or whatever. Well, I mean, you can just renew it online, unless you. I guess every other
Every
time
other
you go.
time. I gotta
But
find
most
out.
of the time, I'm doing like, registration or any kind of tag stuff or whatever. Or if you're selling a car, you need. Anyway, so I just thought it was amazing. I was like, why are they listening to this lady so wonderfully? But
She sounds like one who speaks with authority.
seriously. And they were in awe, and I was in awe.
Is that Jesus? No, that's Janice, and she used to be a middle school PE teacher.
And Janet, you do not want to have a problem with Janice.
Let's just wrap it up, guys. I feel
Yeah.
I
like
feel like
that?
we touched
Sorry,
on
we
our
kinda-
point.
There was a gym teacher at Northwest Middle, kind of like that.
well,
I can't remember her name.
That's exactly what
She
he
had
was
like short,
talking about.
you know, like short reddish hair.
Yeah, that's exactly this
Yeah.
who I'm envisioning in my head, and I don't know what the name is. I
Is
have
it like McVeigh or something?
I'm
That's
pretty
it.
yes, dude. That I have nothing against that teacher. I just when Jonathan describes somebody with like a short haircut and it's kind of strict, that's exactly who popped in my head. Miss McVeigh.
Well, no, I mean, I don't know. It might
Sure,
just be
she's
the
probably
kind of haircut where it's
listening.
like, hey, I'm not messing
Shout
around.
out
You know,
to Miss
I'm not
McVeigh.
messing around. I'm only doing what I need to do, and this haircut suits what I'm doing.
All that to say, we're jumping into Mark 4.
Yeah.
What is it? Verses 35 through 41, chapter 4.
That's it.
All right. Okay. All right. I'll read it and then
You weren't even on the right page, bro.
I was. I thought I wasn't. All right. It says, on that day, When evening had come, he said to them, "Let us go across to the other side." And leaving the crowd, they took him with them in the boat, just as he was, and other boats were with him. And a great windstorm arose, and the waves were breaking into the boat, so that the boat was already filling. But he was in the stern, asleep on the cushion. And they woke him and said to him, "Teacher, do you not care that we are perishing?" And he awoke and rebuked the wind, and said to the sea, "Peace, be still." And the wind ceased, and there was a great calm. He said to them, "Why are you so afraid? Have you still no faith?" And they were filled with great fear, and said to one another, "Who then is this, that even the wind and the sea obey him?" So this was Brother Jonathan's suggestion this week, so we'll kick it off to him.
Yeah, man. I like during this week when I was trying to figure out what like verse or section of scripture I wanted to do this. I don't know. Just at one point, just kind of became really obvious. Can't remember what I was thinking about, but yeah. So when I was reading this, my first thought was just about fear, and I don't know. I mean, we can kind of go into the details because there's a lot here. Even as far as the wind, but as far as the wind obeying Jesus, but just in general, like when I read this, I think about what had happened before, and the disciples had seen the miracle at the wedding, and even then it says that they believe, when they saw this, they believed in him, and then they had heard the Sermon on the Mount by this point, because there's also a parallel in Matthew 8, I think it's 8:23. It's talking about the same story. So it's after they had seen miracles. At this point, they understand that Jesus is who he is. Even Nathaniel, as soon as he met Jesus and he told him, "Hey, I saw you under the fig tree," and he said, "Oh my gosh, you were the Messiah." So they're walking around with the Messiah that had been called for thousands of years or whatever. And now all of a sudden they're in this boat. So I want to stop right there. They're in this mindset of they're walking around with this man who was doing miracles and preaching things that has never been seen before, and they believe that he is the Messiah that has been talked about in all of the prophets and all of the scripture that exists at that point. And now all of a sudden, as soon as they get into this situation where there's a little bit of danger or a little bit of uncertainty, immediately their first thought goes to, we're going to die. Oh, the storm is going to kill us. And it wasn't like a storm was a rare thing in the Sea of Galilee. Like, I guess that's where they're at, Sea of Galilee.
Yeah, and most of these guys are fishermen.
They're fishermen. And just listening to it, actually, it was ironic. Yesterday on 106.9, a guy, I can't remember I can never remember his name.
Isn't it ironic?
Chip Ingram, maybe? Yeah, so he was talking about this section of scripture, actually. And he was talking about how there were storms all the time on the Sea of Galilee. And I talked to a guy who's been to Israel, and he was like, oh, they come out of nowhere. So anyway, this isn't like an uncommon occurrence, but immediately they're fearful to the point where they're like waking them up, like, hey, you don't even care that we're about to die? And I don't know, man, it's just, when I read this and I imagine my own situation in my own life, there's just so many times to where on one moment I will be on cloud nine and I'm like, oh my gosh, I have seen the glory of God firsthand. I've seen it changing this person's life, or I've seen this miraculous thing happen, or we prayed over this person and all of a sudden all of their tests came back fine, and it didn't have to be that way. It's so easy to like all of a sudden discount God in those situations, like, oh no, it actually wasn't that bad, or the doctors did great, all that to say, I'll go from those moments of being like, wow, just absolutely in awe of God's power. And immediately something happens, and it's like, like, and I just really, I experienced true fear, and all of that. Jesus says it best. I mean, well, in Matthew he says, "Oh, you of little faith," and here he says, "Why are you so afraid? Have you still no faith?" And the reality is, if I'm being honest with myself, the reality is, if I truly, truly believe in the power of God, and I truly believe that he is above everything, so much so that the wind and the waves, and as it talks about in Job, he's referring God's power to the lightning. It's like, you have no idea where this comes from, and it's so much more powerful than you that you can't even fathom it. If that's where I'm living and that's where my heart is all the time, then there's absolutely no reason to be afraid. And so, yeah, that's why this verse was speaking to me. But yeah, so open that up to Don't necessarily have a specific question, but just whatever you guys
Good stuff.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think you look at. I think the biggest point of the passage is that the disciples knew that he was the Messiah. They had seen him do, cast out demons. They had seen him heal the paralytic. But then he controls the weather, and they're like, "Hold on a second, who is this?" Because if you go back and look at some of the Psalms, you look at Job, there's only one person who controls the weather, and it's God. And I think the main point of the passage is speaking to Jesus' identity as being God. And I think I was listening to something on this, and I'll throw out the question. If the disciples, what do you think the lack of faith was? What would have been different if they would have had faith? What do you think they would have done?
I don't think their actions would have been much different. Their mentality would have been very different. I don't know if they would have woken Jesus up or not, or if they would have woken him up in confidence.
Because I heard it presented like they wouldn't have just stayed out there and just kept rowing. They would have been like, because the question that they ask is, Jesus, do you not care? And they said, I think them having faith would have been them going to confidence, like, Jesus, we need your help, instead of trying to fight it by themselves. Which I think is a shadow, kind of like the analogy that I gave that Leighton Flowers gives, like he's standing at the top of the stairs, his kids are standing at the bottom of the stairs, and the only way they get up there is like, Lord, help us. So that's just kind of.
So you're saying it's less the action of turning to Jesus and more the mode of why, like,
The way that they did it.
Yeah. I've been wrestling with it. I've been thinking through it on a lot of different levels, but one of the levels is just that, like, well, was there anything wrong about them being like, hey, I'm just thinking about in my personal life. Okay, if there's a storm in my life, what do we need to turn to Jesus, right? So that's exactly what they did. Now, my normal response initially is exactly what their response is. Do you not care, Jesus? Because sometimes you feel like, I know Jesus is like here, but he feels like he's like asleep. He's not responding to me, and I really need like in the moment response to help me with this storm that I'm in. And sometimes it happens that way. Sometimes it feels like you're talking to yourself, and you feel like he's asleep in the stern of the boat. And that question of, well, why? Like, do you not care, God? Like, do you not care? Like that question rings really true with me, because during a season that I was in a few years ago, like that was a question like, God, I believe that you're here, but it feels like you have no part into what I'm going through. Like, I feel like I'm on the boat and you're asleep. And so I do think that the solution and what we should do is like, okay, in those storms, we should turn to Jesus. So I do like the way you asked that. So anyway, I'll pause there because I could go down 15
By the way,
other
man,
rabbit
that
holes.
Screensaver is
It's
going to give me a seizure.
very
We're
energetic.
having a dance party over here on this side of the. It's like the bubble screensaver, but it's like.
It's hyper speed.
So I told Brett,
It's like a rave.
this is Chessa's computer, so she would never have the bubbles going halfway. Like, you need to be going all out, nonstop, all the time.
Yeah.
So even her bubbles know that. So,
We must protect this screen.
Yeah.
Just
The
as
bubbles
her
go in it.
bubble as well.
yeah. So no, I think that's a good way of asking, or a good thought experiment, or whatever you want to say.
Let me on top of that question, would it? I don't have the answer to this question, so it's just to see what your thoughts are. Would it be an indication of more faith had the disciples, like without fear, just endured the storm quietly, peacefully, tried to emulate Jesus who was sleeping, and genuinely their hearts were settled and they're fine with whatever the outcome was, and kind of reserved to their fate, but knowing that ultimately in the end it's all going to be good to go anyways, and have that faith and peace and serenity in the storm? Or is it like an indication of more faith that, like, hey, this is literally a disastrous situation, we're about to get swallowed up, we are fishermen, most of us, and we've experienced storms like this before, but this one is really bad. We are going to perish. We've got the Lord up with us, so we're going to ask him in faith to, not from a place of fear, because I think that's also the thing that Christ, it's probably pretty easy to read it on their faces, and even if it wasn't easy to read it physically, he would know their hearts and the intention of their hearts, and he sensed and felt and knew that they were coming from a place of extreme fear and anxiety and worry, like overcome by it. Like, we're gonna die, Jesus, you don't care. That's kind of how I envisioned them, like freaking out. How he was sleeping during that, I don't know. On a side note, that's impressive.
He was exhausted.
But like, which one?
Yes.
Are both of those genuine, like, good, like, proper ways to go in faith? Where it's like the one is like, I'm not stressed about it. I'm not worried about it. I'm content with whatever happens in this. If the Lord wants to save the situation, he will, and if he doesn't, that's okay too. I'm good. I'm in Christ. Or it's like I'm burdened to call on the Lord for him to help resolve the situation. Are both of those okay? Like, could they have just quietly taken their faith or taken their fate and be like, that's because of my strong faith, I'm okay with whatever happens? Do you see what I'm?
Yeah,
There's those two differences. Like, which one?
I think both.
What is that question? Like, is it, do you wait for the Lord and then get, how does it go? Because I'm going to butcher it, but I feel like that's kind of the question.
It
was like
if somebody comes to save you.
Trust in the Lord and then get going, or verse wait
let go and let God, or trust God and get going.
Yeah. That's kind of that question, and
yeah. Well, I think both are. I mean, I don't know. I don't have the answer. But
I don't know about
both.
this specific situation, but I think the question that you're asking, I think, is a very practical question. I think that's a question that, is somebody that's like, God, I really am trying to do this by faith, and like, I want to discern your will, but I'm not sure, and I could do A or I could do B, and I don't feel like you're giving me a clear answer on this. And both of these, to the most genuine I can recognize inwardly, is I'm doing this to honor you and by faith. Is it, do I pause here? Do I row, trusting that it's, or do I pause and be like, lay at Jesus' feet and be like, Jesus, I need you to help me? I think, and
I think
it probably just depends.
Yeah. I don't know. So once again, when I was reading this week, it was like, I was just imagining again, we've mentioned it plenty of times on here, or I have, about the same waves that strike fear in some people are the ones that the surfers run after or whatever. And so kind of on the same note, I'm just imagining almost like a movie scene, where they're like, there's one guy, he's like the seasoned pirate, and he's like, okay, boys, let's go, and they're holding onto the rails, and they're just, but with
Seasoned pirate.
but with like a sense of
Really
like
salty.
Well, with just like a sense of assuredness in their hearts, like, this is nuts, but we're laughing about it because on the deepest level of who we are, this guy is the Messiah and is God. And so odds are this is not where this ends. And even if it did, if we're with him, then what does it matter? You know what I mean? Like, if you could really internalize that in your heart, then I feel like it's just a different scenario. There's almost like a third piece of that where it's like, well, I mean, I guess it's, no, it's like what you're saying, Finn, where it's just, you're just calm and, you're not worried about what the outcome is going to be. And I don't know. I think it's a perfect scenario here where Jesus wakes up and literally calms the sea with a word, just showing, like, it wasn't like he had to conjure up something and get the smoke going and everything. And he's like heaving himself back and forth, and the wind barely listens to him. But all of a sudden at the end, it was actually okay. It was peace be still, and it was done. And it's like, in my mind, I'm like, can we really fathom a power that is that great? Because in our world, we're so limited by everything the limitations of the earth. And God is just so much, like, the earth is so much greater than we are. And God is so much greater than that in like an equal or even greater proportion. And so it's like, I don't know, like, is there a place that we can get to in our faith where it's like, it literally doesn't matter, because at any moment, my God can come and just whip this in a different direction with a word. And so there's absolutely nothing for me to fear. And even though I'm walking in a situation that has everything and then some that would be necessary for me to be scared out of my mind or to rock my faith or whatever, but it doesn't, because I just have that kind of relationship with God where I know that he would never bring me into something that he didn't allow me to be into or whatever. And even if it didn't, even if the outcome is nowhere near any of the outcomes I thought it would be, that's okay too. Because at the end of the day, it doesn't matter. Because the moment I leave this earth, I'm in his presence. You know what I'm saying? It's like, at some point you can't lose. And I don't know. It's just, like, for me personally, I'm like, if I could walk around with that kind of just assuredness in every situation, even though there's going to be times where it's like, I'm not sure if I should row on the left side right now or the right side or whatever. But even, so there's different layers there where it's like, I'm just trusting God, or there may be like, hey, Jesus, what do you want me to do? You know what I mean? Like if you turned around and be like, hey, Jesus, what should we do? You know what I mean? That's a different thing than we're dying, man. As and I think that, I don't know, like I said before, there was a time where the Lord was speaking to me and I tried to write it all down afterwards. And so many times over and over, it's you shall not fear. Like to the point where like, it was just over and over. And I don't know. I think that fear is kind of is just, I don't know, maybe that's the opposite of like genuine, assured faith, And I think that's all of our struggles is, how do I trust God so much that fear is just eradicated, And I think being in the Word and reading things like this and constantly having that on our mind, it's like, man, this is how big my God is. Actually, so big I can't even fathom it, But
yes, that like you were talking about fear and faith. He says in verse 40, "Why are you afraid? Do you still have no faith?" Basically, the question leads to the conclusion that if they had faith, proper faith, sufficient amount of faith, they would not be afraid. So that the fear is the result of a lack of faith, I think is what Jesus is saying there. Is like, why are you afraid? Do you not have the faith? And so it does cast out all fear. It's like, what's the verse? It's like perfect love casts out all fear. Faith, hope, and love. And those are the opposites of what it is to live in fear, anxiety, worry, concern. Not that you are flippant and don't care about anything. It's just that you've got the proper order of things in your, again, it's like also fear of the Lord is the beginning of knowledge and wisdom. It's like, that's so proper fear placed, reverence placed in the proper places, the proper level of respect given to God results in a lack of fear, an increase in faith, a peace, a joy, not the anxiety. It removes those things when you are fearing the correct thing, a reverence for the right thing, and living out of a place of faith.
Yeah, what's that quote? Like, if you fear God, if you fear God properly, you won't fear anything else. But if you don't fear God, you'll fear everything else. And so I think it's like where our fear is placed, and the fear of the Lord, is if it's properly placed in Him in this awe and recognition that my God can say a word and this raging storm can literally just stop on a dime. That's the God that I trust sees me and dwells within me, and I'm in His, like, and I dwell within Him, like I'm in Christ and Christ is in me. Like that same Jesus is who we say we now live in and through, starting to walk. I think what Jonathan's saying, I think is that's a great takeaway is like, okay, how do I walk more in that reality? Is like almost have that, not invincible in like a dumb way, but invincible in the sense of like, no matter what the outcome, it's going to be okay. Mm-hmm. And then start to live life from that mode of being, where it's now going to be lived a lot more by a faith element than a fear element. Because if we're honest, like a lot of what we do in life has a fear element too. Like, if I don't do this, then this is going to be the repercussion. And I definitely don't want the repercussion. So I'm going to double down on making sure I do a really good job. Then you do a really good job and everybody's like, oh my gosh, you're so good at that. It's like, where was that coming from? That it was coming because I was so afraid of not doing a good job at it that I worked extra hard to make sure. And it's like, that's a zero. But it looks great. I mean, most of my life, the successes I've had have been the fear of failing so much is what has allowed me to do things. I want to do so good at this, not because I want to honor God or even because I want people to be like, pat on the back is like, I don't want to fail. So anyway, I can relate to the fear element on things for sure.
Yeah. It's like you're running you're like running from something, and all of a sudden you're like, I'm thinking of like Forrest Gump, whenever he's running across the field from those
The truck.
from the truck, and all of a sudden the coaches are like, "Dang, look how fast he is!" You know, it's like, you look back, you're like, "Yeah, no, I crushed that," but in your heart, you're like, "No, I was scared out of my mind." You know, that's what I was thinking about.
Third or fourth Forrest Gump reference?
Dude, I haven't seen it. The thing is,
Die Hard. He's never actually seen the movie.
no, I have plenty of times, but it's been a long time, and somehow it keeps creeping up. But anyway, so Matthew 10:26 is in my Bible. It's titled "Have No Fear." 26 is, so have no fear of them. He's referring to persecution, but just in general, I think this fits very well. Have no fear of them, for nothing is covered that will not be revealed, or hidden that will not be known. What I tell you in the dark, say in the light, and what you hear whispered, proclaim on the housetops. And do not fear those who kill the body, but cannot kill the soul. Rather, fear him who can destroy both soul and body in hell. Are not 2 sparrows sold for a penny, and not one of them will fall to the ground apart from your Father? But even the hairs of your head are all numbered. Fear not, therefore, you are of more value than many sparrows. So everyone who acknowledges me before men, I also will acknowledge before my Father who is in heaven. But whoever denies me before men, I also will deny before my Father who is in heaven. But just I don't know, man. There's like a different level, and I feel like I've been there in my mind, a different level of trust and a different level of just confidence in the Lord, where it's like, if God is for me, who can be against me? I've said that to you, Josiah, before on mountaintop moments, where it's like, if God is for me, then like it doesn't matter, like just the other day, somebody was saying to me, just kind of like an old saying or whatever, but 100 years from now, what the heck difference will it make? You know what I mean? And I'm not sure that applies, but it's like, if our mindset is just like, if God is for me, and all of this minutia of all the things that I'm working through right now eventually will just cease to matter. I don't know. It's like, how do we stay there in our, like, I guess the question would be, how do I stay there on a day-to-day basis from the moment I wake up to the moment I go to bed, to where even when financial hardships come, and even when, we have a kid who's like in the wrong crowd or whatever, and we're trying to figure all that out, and we're praying over him, whatever. How can I literally walk through those moments and be like, honey, it doesn't matter. Like, God is for us, God is with us, and it's okay. And he's gonna help us, but no matter what the outcome, God is God, and we are who we are. And it's a lot easier said than done.
I think that's going to be just on a side. As right now, all of our children are young. They're in our house. We keep them safe. They're not making a bunch of decisions on their own. But as they get older, there's going to be opportunity for. The older you get, the more opportunity for disasters and worse life decisions start to come in as a reality. It's like, it's like maybe the fear is not so much for yourself, but it's like a fear for your children, or a fear for like, other people, that it's like, I just don't want, I think again, it's going to be especially our children, because they're our children. You want them to succeed and do well and be okay. And it's like, how do you turn over the fear and anxiety of, Lord, I pray that they're going to be okay. You have to entrust them to the Lord. One, that he loves them far more than we could ever possibly love them. And yeah, but it's tough, because it's like, if you see them making decisions that are like disastrous for their life one day, it's like, man, I'm fearful that they're going to go down this path and it not be okay.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, but I think on the other side, being okay with, like, that's something.
There's like a healthy fear that you should have.
I don't know, man.
Yeah, but if I go I should have a fear of putting my hand on a hot stove.
Yeah, you could call, like a fear of it, or you could call it like a respect or reverence.
Maybe don't call it a healthy fear, but right? Because you should have some type of
a healthy fear of, when I'm climbing on a roof, I would be dumb to just be tiptoeing around the edge because I thought it was funny, because I have no fear of falling. It's like, that would be dumb. I need to have a healthy awareness of my surroundings, that I could make a misstep and disaster. Yeah. So I think I'm getting what you're trying to say.
That's not.
What were you saying though? Sorry, I cut you off.
I was gonna. Well, no, just and once again, I'm not putting this on anybody else. it's all of us, but like I feel like we in our human condition, in our culture or whatever, it's like on one hand it's like, oh yeah, no, perfect love casts out fear, but on the other hand it's like all of a sudden we kind of, it's easy to sort of put on like the honorable, like, oh well, when it comes to my family though, I'll fear for them, I'll take on that burden for them.
Not,
and it's
I
like,
don't think
wait.
Yeah, I think you're right. I think maybe fear is not it, but you want a level of concern for your children. It's not like but it's a bold trusting in the Lord.
Right. Well, I guess my question is there another level there where it's like, you know what? I'm a child of God. My children, are they really my children? Or are they God's children too? Or first, And so there's some level there where it's like, what if there is a healthy respect? And I'm imagining like, like the mom of 4 who has 4 teenagers or whatever. Like just the other day, or like last year, this girl was running and she's like maybe number 3 or 4. They have like 5 kids. And the mom is like, in my opinion, at that point in time, was way too chill. So she fell. She thought she broke her arm. She's like crying. So like all of a sudden I'm in like kid mode. I run to the door and I'm like, hey, she fell. Like, anyway, the mom comes out there and she's like standing there, like doesn't even bend over. She's like, you all right? And she's like, I think so. Anyway, and 2 hours later, she's riding her bike, cruising along the thing. And meanwhile, my 1-year-old daughter is like, I'm like, oh my gosh, we got to like pad this room. You know what I'm saying? And it's like, that's a heavy dose of fear that I have over my child. This lady's seen enough where she's like, you know what? Even if she broke her arm, we'll just take her to the thing and they'll fix her because it's just her physical body anyway. Like, you know what I'm saying? Like, what if there is a next level there where it's just like, I just trust God so much that even with my own children, or, you know what I mean? I don't know if that's what I'm thinking about with that. Like,
yeah, my fear would not even fear. My concern with children is not so much that I don't think that God loves them or that he cannot work all things together for their good, but that I believe people have a genuine responsibility to respond to God's love. And then the fear would be that they don't, or that they don't have that relationship with the Lord. That would be more of the fear for me than anything else about, do you see what I'm saying? That would be the concern. And so it's not so much a fear of like, it's more of a genuine desire to see that in their lives and a concern. I don't know what better word there is. It's not like I'm scared that it's more, it's like I genuinely want that for them. I want that for everybody because it's, in my opinion, it is the truth and there's no better way to live life than in relationship with Christ. Do what?
It's not just in your opinion.
Yeah, well, I mean, yeah,
no,
it is.
In my opinion, it is the truth.
And
that's the truth, even if it wasn't my opinion.
Yeah, even if it wasn't my opinion, it'd still be true. But it
that's
is my opinion
about the truth.
That it
doesn't change.
But does that make sense? It's not so much like
it's not a scared that it's not a afraidness
or a
God's
lack of trust in God's ability to love them, or that he doesn't love them. It's a concern over them choosing not to participate in that life. They go a different route that's the wide path that leads to destruction.
Yeah. No, I understand. There's some part, and once I'm taking a very, like, I'm not a combative stance, but I'm taking the stance of like, what if there's more? Like, even then, I'm thinking about the prayer, or like what James talks about, like the prayer of or if you pray in full faith, then like that prayer has power. But if I'm praying for my kids and I'm like having this fear, I'm like, oh, because God, what if they just don't? Oh, whereas if I'm just praying over them, I'm like, Lord, I'm trusting you with their faith, trusting you with their, like, even when you're praying for your kids, at night, it's like a lot of times I'm like, oh, Lord, let them be healthy, let them be wise or whatever. And then half the time I forget to even like pray that like, Lord, give them a double measure of faith, like let their faith be so rock solid that other people like turn to it and can make their nest in it, because it's just like, wow, that guy is something else. Like, why am I not praying for that first? But even then, it's, if I'm praying for my kids with assurance, it's like, Lord, you've saved my life, and I'm trusting you that they're in your hands as well. And I'm pleading with you as your child of God that you will, corral their circumstances in such a way that they can know you the way I do. Lord, please let them know you the way I do. It's like, is that somehow a different scenario where praying with full confidence isn't better? Or, you know what I'm saying? Is there a free will element there?
Well, I don't think it's a lack of... yeah.
I think praying that way is a good way to pray for your children.
See, everything you guys are talking about, I'm just thinking about that analogy about should I row or should I be at peace here? Because I feel like I don't think our hearts are, I'm not hearing any difference about what you're saying about like the heart thing. I think we're talking about more like the
How it plays out.
How it plays out. And now, once again, I'm just listening. That's how I'm hearing it, but I could be wrong there. Because, yeah, you could be praying from a place of, like, I'm so afraid and I'm up all night, sleepless all night because my kid's out and, they just got their license last week and I'm super scared. Or you could pray like, Lord,
Is
hey.
that what your fear voice sounds like?
I know. I was like, is he trying to make a voice? Or is he not?
Yes, that's in my mind. That's my anxious thought mind voice.
Josiah, what happens if this happens?
Anyway, I don't know. I do think that there's just, and I don't know the difference. That's where it's this idea of rowing versus not rowing, and you can get to a place of fear of that. But I think the cool thing about how God created us is He created like man to multiply the image of God on earth. So there's an element where there's a responsibility that He's bestowed upon us, that He's asked us to walk in. And we can only do that when we're walking in and through the life of Christ in us. There's no other way of properly doing that. And so there's this element of like, even with our kids or just things in life, it's like, is there I don't want to say laissez-faire sense of faith where it's like, it all will be what it'll be okay. It's all going to take care of itself. And I have that faith in God versus God has given me this responsibility for my kids. Once again, both sides can have a unhealthy or a healthy element to it. And so it's like, okay, how do you discern that? And so anyway, I'm just, as you're describing all that, those are thoughts that are coming to me. It's like, I don't know. God's giving me a response. You know what I'm going to do? I'm going to do everything I can possibly do to point them to Christ every step of the way. And not out of a place. I don't know. Like, there's times where am I doing this because I'm afraid of what not at this age, really, not that I'm aware of. They're 4 and or I guess 5 now. But it's like, I pour into them on a regular basis, and it's just an outflow of my life. Like yesterday, we had the cleaning. We have two cleaning ladies come every 3 weeks, and they're Hispanic. And anyway, this is interesting. This is a side note, but we do like a little Bible thing in the morning with the kids, and they'll pick a Bible verse. And so we were doing a Bible verse, and the cleaning ladies had arrived, and they were eating breakfast, and I'm talking about the Bible verse with Shiloh and them. Shiloh's like, shh, the cleaning ladies here. They don't. And I was like, well, that's okay if they hear us talking about Jesus. She's like, well, do they know who Jesus is? And I was like, I don't know. That's all the more reason we should talk about Jesus. But anyway, I was like, I don't know where that's coming from in a 5-year-old. Is there a level of like already like self-awareness, or anyway, did somebody tell her we shouldn't talk about our faith around other people? I don't know, but it's my responsibility. Is God has given me that responsibility, and it's not on my shoulders completely. Like, I can't drag them and have them have a genuine relationship with Christ, but I can do everything.
Wish we could.
Right? Yeah, I wish we could, but I can do a lot of things to point them in that direction, and I can do a lot of things that would kind of be like, yeah, Daddy said he believed all this, but his life looked a lot different behind closed doors. I don't know if this stuff's real. And I have that option too. And I have that option day in and day out. And then ultimately I have to say, Lord, I've done everything I feel like I can do within my power. And ultimately I can only point them to you, but I can't finish that. Mm-hmm. And I got to trust you with that. And I have to trust you by faith, not by fear. God, I hope that it's like, no, God, I trust that you want them to be in relationship with you even more than I do. And I can rest in that. But
we would say they'd still ultimately have that.
They have that decision.
Yeah, I heard somebody say like the best way to pray for people is to pray for like their circumstances and stuff, like because God won't impose on somebody's free will. It's like change their heart. It's like God won't change their heart unless they're willing to. Anyway, that's a whole nother discussion. But I was like, oh, that's an interesting.
Let me ask you this: tie it somewhat back to the verse. What if like we were on the boat by ourselves, and then what if we were on the boat with our children? Would we act differently? If our child was on the boat with us, would we be more anxious to get Jesus awake to save us the situation?
Well,
or
what the other
thing, like, I'd probably be more reserved to my fate on my own with no children involved. But if my child is there, I'd be more proactively like, hey, Jesus, I trust you. We need you to fix this situation. At least that's the hope I would go to Jesus in that way of confidence, and like that he will fix the situation and that you will save.
When I made the reference of the act of faith being going to Jesus. I'm not saying we're going to Jesus as out of fear, right? I'm going to Jesus because I know that He's here.
Mm-hmm.
I just want to make that clarification. But yeah, I don't know.
That's a good question. I would probably be, my natural instinct would probably be more fearful with my kids there.
It's like the waves haven't even started. It's just like the storm's off in the distance, and it's like, hey, Jesus.
Do you have your life jacket on?
Yep.
But it's like some of that's just being wise. You don't want to be flippant and dumb.
Well, so here's a couple interesting things I noticed from this story is, who was the one that said we're going to do this now? Jesus. It was Jesus' idea.
We're going to go to the other side.
So and then it says that there's other small boats that went with them. So they weren't the only boats that went on sea to follow Jesus. There were other boats that were in the vicinity.
What happened to the other boats?
Well, I would have to. So in my mind,
we don't know.
Yeah. Well, all the other boats didn't. But no, I think they received the blessing of the fact that there are people in proximity of Jesus. But there's this element. So I think that
we don't know.
Okay. Yeah,
they
right.
Died.
We don't know. We don't know, but I think that anyway. So, but there's this element. It's like it was Jesus' idea. So there has to be this moment where the disciples are like, "This dude told us to do this, and look where we're at, and he's asleep over here. What is this guy doing?" But then it also parallels, like, if you read the story of Jonah, like this story's. There's so many parallels there. There's this storm. Jonah was told to go to the Gentiles in Nineveh. Well, he disobeyed. He went the other direction. Jesus is going across the sea to seem like he's pretty much going to call out the demon-possessed boy in the Gerasenes or whatever, the one that's like a legion, because, there's many of us. He goes over there. If you read the next story, he goes over there for that one person, and then they depart to some other place. And when that guy says, "Hey, I want to follow you, Jesus," he's like, "No, you need to stay here and spread the word around here." And everybody else in that area told Jesus to get out of town. So there's this Nineveh. Jonah finally goes to Nineveh. Everybody in Nineveh is just like, "Yeah, sackcloth." Everybody repents. Jesus goes this other side. One person repents. Everybody else is like, "Get out of town, Jesus." But they were crossing the sea for that specific reason. Jonah's asleep in the boat. Jesus is asleep in the boat. Jonah has to get thrown in the water for the storm to stop. Jesus calms the storm itself, which if you read the story of Jonah, it says afterwards when the storm stopped, they were the same, at least in the New King James Version, the wording is the same. It says, and they feared exceedingly. That's what the sailors said after they saw the storm stop, and that's what the disciples said after they saw the storm stop. And so anyway, and I would think that when Mark's writing this, he knows the story of Jonah, and he's probably pulling some of that verbiage. He's like, Jesus is the fulfillment. I mean, that's one of the promises. He says the prophecies he gives is like the sign of Jonah. Just as Jonah was in the whale for 3 days, I'll be in the earth for 3 days. So anyway, I just think about all that kind of stuff. It's like, oh, there's so much nuance to the story also that paints this picture of like, the one that calmed that storm in the sea is the one that's in this boat right now. And they're like, anyway.
Yeah, the story of Jonah.
Those are probably more just like little cool things, little nuggets, application, probably circles back to what Jonathan said is like, we serve a God that is above the fray, and we can turn to Him in the midst of any storm.
Yeah. Trusting the who and the what.
I'm not sure if this is so. I don't know, man. I don't want this to come out the wrong way, or sound like morbid or anything like that. But I don't know. I kind of wonder if God like to us here on earth, it's like death is this huge thing. You know what I mean? It's like, oh my gosh, they are dead. You know what I mean? And our whole lives, and I think it's part of our hardwiring, right? Like go and multiply on the earth, and like we have a natural fear of death, or we have a natural like we don't want to. There's not people that are craving to die. You know what I mean? And I think that's a good, healthy thing, and that's a self-preserving thing or whatever. But it's like, I don't know, there's so many times I read in the Word, and once again, it's like kind of that next level. If you know that the moment you leave here, you're in the presence of God, and there's absolutely no doubt in your mind, that's just where that's literally the next moment. I'm only here for a little while. To live is Christ, to die is gain. Now, to live is Christ, right? Like I'm here to do the work of Christ, and that's what I want to do, and I want that for my family so they can serve the Lord. What an honor it is to be able to do that. But I don't know. It's like there's a lot of times I'm reading the Word, and it's just like, man, like from God's perspective, is death on this earth really like that big of a deal? You know what I mean? with him knowing full well like where you go in the next place. And I don't know, there's some element in my mind. It's like, I don't know. It's like, is it that, well, I don't want to say is death that big of a deal, but really as a believer, as a follower of Christ, it's like, what if we have that genuine faith that we know where we're going as soon as we leave here, and we know that place is better? It's not that you're craving it at all, but like, does that take some of the sting off? Does that take some of the fear out of the equation, where it's like, even if I died in this, I would have died serving my Lord? You know, and you know, it's like, oh, I hate that for my family, but probably not, because I'm gonna be in the presence of God, and I'm gonna realize how much control God actually has in their lives, and how I was never the protector. It was always God. I could never have stopped that 18-wheeler, any 18-wheeler, from just wiping us out at any moment. All of that is God. You know what I mean? And I don't know, I guess the point of what I'm saying is, when I'm reading through the scriptures and reading this where it says, have no fear, you know, he's comparing life to sparrows, you know what I mean, that are worth a penny each. And I don't know, it's like, I think our souls are incredibly valuable to God. But our humanly body and our life here on earth, I don't know, may be worth less than... Or, you know what I mean? I don't know how to say that.
Well, it's not eternal. It's not the end all be all.
Yeah, I'm trying.
Sure.
I would agree with what you're saying. I'm trying to. As you're saying, I'm trying to think of, okay, like practically, what would my day look like? What would I change about my life with that mentality? Because I agree. I think that's a healthy mentality to have. Like, and I think it's that.
And for the record, I'm just spitballing, by the way.
Yeah, go
so
ahead.
I'm just no, you go ahead. But
No. I think that's a good. We should hold our life here very loosely. But yeah, anyway, I don't know what that looks like.
Well, we treat
in
it
the
like it's
practical
not our
day-to-day.
life to begin with. We don't have ownership of our own lives.
But I guess I'm in
we've
the
been-
practical. It's like, okay, does that mean I don't wear a seat buckle?
No.
Do I not buckle my kids in? Like, do I never go to the doctor anymore? Do I? And I know I'm not saying I'm not saying you're saying any of this. What I'm going through in my mind is like, yeah, I love that mentality. I think that is a healthy mentality to have. The practical of it is where I would.
yeah,
Keep going. I was gonna say I got to roll, but keep rolling.
yeah.
Well, I think we're about close to wrapping it up anyways. I don't know how to pack up all your equipment.
Just hit stop, and then save as draft, and then just shut the computer.
Now everybody that's listening to our podcast knows to come shut us down. I'm scared.
They know the secret code, but
Are you going to pass back by here and pick all this up? I'm a little stressed about this.
I'll come back by.
Are we gonna leave it here?
You're sleeping. Sorry,
conversation-
pre-podcast
Our
or mid-podcast.
Yeah.
fearful leaders.
Fearful.
Or I'm sorry, our fearless leader. Oh no, what a awful thing to say about someone.
Old fearful Brett. Old bi-yearly Brett.
Fearful of the Lord.
Yeah.
Amen.
Yeah, dude. There you go.
Dude, those skinny jeans looking good on you. This is quite the
Those your wife's
conundrum.
Chaps. These are chaps.
Chaps,
I haven't seen the
dude.
back yet.
Oh man. Oh. Wow.
I see.
Wow.
I see
Nice.
what's going on.
Nice.
All right, tie it back in.
Yeah,
I'm fearful right now of Brett being gone.
This podcast will never end. We don't know how to stop it.
yeah, just keep rolling. So yeah, I guess in my mind I'm like, okay, and I absolutely agree. Once again, I think that to live as Christ, to die as gain. The more time I have on earth, the more time I can serve the Lord. Like, that is my goal, right? Or that is my, like, I should be taking care of my body, right? I should be appreciating the temple. You know, the Holy Spirit lives in me, therefore my body is His temple, and I should treat it with respect in every aspect, you know, but in a healthy respect, because at the end of the day, it will be dust to dust. So yeah, I think you're absolutely right. Of course, we should be taking care of ourselves. That way we're, can serve the Lord, I don't know, more effectively or whatever. But I guess I'm saying in the back of our minds, it's like, if we're really walking around with a sense of like, at the end of the day, it doesn't matter. Like, if I were to die tomorrow, that would be okay, because my family's going to be okay, because God is the one who's in control. And you know what I'm saying? You plan for plan for the future, but if it doesn't happen, there's a piece there.
Yes. Yeah. I think it's like I think a good analogy to kind of what we're talking about is like a soldier in war, or a leader of platoon, or however you want to describe it. But he's in the combat.
Fearful leader.
But he's not afraid. But he's on mission. So he's not like, I'm going to run out and get machine gunned just because it doesn't matter. It's like, I want to be intentional in leading my troops. We're trying to accomplish a mission. We're trying to get to this goal. We're get to this endpoint. But during that whole time, I'm not functioning in my role from a place of fear, of self-preservation, of we can't even go on the attack because somebody might die. It's like there's a healthy level of confidence and reserved to your fate regardless of what happens, but you're there on a mission. You're there to accomplish a purpose. And for the time that we're here, it's to live as Christ, to die as gain. So it's like I'm on mission to live by the indwelling life of Christ and to make him known and to share that truth with as many people as possible and to live that type of life with my family. So I'm on mission. I'm accomplishing a purpose. I'm living purposefully, but it's not from a place of fear and cowardice and like concern about what could go wrong. It's like confidently going in that path, but not, I'm not going to buckle up ever. I'm going to do dumb things. I don't care if I'll smoke a pack a day. I might die of lung cancer, but it doesn't matter. You know what I'm saying? Like, that's not what we're doing, but we're also not cowering in fear and concern. We are trying to accomplish a purpose and a mission. So it's like there's an intentionality and focus to our life that kind of orients that without being consumed by fear. And I think that's that soldier analogy, that leader of a platoon, however you want to say it, is a good one to think through. It's like you're doing what you're supposed to be doing in your role, but you're not doing it out of fear. Doing it confidently, but you're also not doing it in a dumb way where you're trying to get killed.
I think about, isn't there I don't know if it's I don't know if it's a brand anymore, but wasn't there a brand that was like No Fear? It was like a clothing line brand. And then I don't know if it was actually a Christian brand or I'm just thinking maybe there was a t-shirt, but it was like Fear Not. And so I just think about the world's like that, dude, that extreme sports mentality, like no fear, man, like YOLO. And then there's this other side. It's like, well, we're not saying that. That's not what we're trying to describe. Like, YOLO, man. Like, who cares, dude? Like, do the crazy stuff because YOLO. But it's like the other side is like, no, fear not, because our fear is actually rooted and grounded in the ultimate thing. And we know that we are passing through here. And the more we have that mentality, the more open we can be with the way we live our life here. But not in this mentality of no fear, man. Just do whatever you want. And so anyway, it's like there's the world way of going about that, and then there's like the way I think we're trying to describe. Not that we're walking in that perfectly, but like how do we grow deeper in that fear not mentality and living life from that standpoint?
Guys, I'm gonna I also have to go.
Yeah. All right, then let's just close it.
I'm gonna let y'all wrap
Jonathan,
it up.
I have to leave too, dude.
No, so it's cool, guys. I'll just kind of monologue this. Well, no, the last thing I want to say is I think that the biggest difference is these guys were walking with Jesus.
Yes.
And at the end of the day, it's
or
like, okay,
rowing.
how do we pick which things are healthy fear or what like the whole thing is they were walking with Jesus. They were serving him as his disciples and learning from him, and they were following him. And so I think at the end of the day, like, is if our eyes are set on Christ and our eyes are set on the Lord and we are following him with everything we have, and it's his plan before mine, his kingdom before mine. And I just heard a sermon the other day where it's like, I was like, as soon as I start focusing on my own kingdom and building my own kingdom, that direct connection with God, that like, hey, follow me, I'm showing you the way step by step, that like starts to kind of fall away immediately until I turn my eyes back to his kingdom. It's like, Lord, how do I help you build your kingdom? As I'm doing that, he's building my kingdom beside me. You know what I mean? That's not even where my focus is. And so if that's where we are, we're in the Word, we're literally trying to serve God with our whole life, and we're literally trying to spread the gospel to our children and to everyone around us. And that's the thing is God might literally walk you into a storm because there's something he wants you to have from there, or he wants you to do in that storm or whatever. Or it may be that he doesn't want you to do that. And that's the thing is it's like, we're never going to be able to know that if we're not 100% set on following him wherever it may lead. Yeah. And I think that at the end of the day, that's what everything else starts to become nuanced, and there's just no way to put your finger on like, okay, what should we do? Other than just following the Lord. Yeah. And each person's path is going to be different. Yeah. And as soon as I put my path on you, it doesn't fit right, and vice versa. And so, I don't know. I think in closing, that's where I was kind of landing on this, where it's like, if I'm with Jesus and my heart is with him 100%,